Hello and welcome to This Is. I am Angie.
What, Matt? You've never been Angie a day in your life.
Look, you all called me a liar, a deviant,
A scoundrel?
a scallywogger.
Scallywogger?
That's someone said that. I said there would be no PS5 Slim, and then Sony said, "Ha! We're gonna make him look dumb on the internet."
Is it like lowercase slim?
It's Slim with asterisk.
No, it's asterisk. Yeah, it's
So
a bit smaller.
Let me explain why I didn't think that there would be a Slim. I want to defend myself here because my honor has been tarnished.
Wait, is this the whole video just talking about you and how you didn't
No,
think
well, I
there's a
just
PS5
like I
Slim?
want to
Because there's a lot of stuff to talk about with the actual Slim.
But like, all right, we've seen some teardowns now from Dave 2D. We've seen it from Linus. We stopped our teardown ourselves to just come and rant about this. The motherboards of this one here is the exact same.
Yeah, we're not done with that testing. Make sure to subscribe to the main channel for the full in-depth teardown and testing because we are, as recording this video, in the middle of that process. So I don't want to say definitively it's the same. But there are some things that are very similar.
It's so similar to the 1200 model that we took a look at last year. I had said, like, if they shrunk down the motherboard. My thought process there was if they weren't going to do it then with all this, it wasn't going to happen. That's why I said there wasn't going to be a Slim. But, like, it's just, what is...
Super weird. Okay, so
is this coming from?
Can I walk us through the timeline? Because you may not realize this, my friends, but we are on the 4th version of the PS5. So there's the PS5 1000, the launch model, which had the big chungy heatsink and all the kind of fun goodies and gizmos. Then there was the PS5 1100, which basically was the exact same thing, except they took the heatsink and went zip, 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 and got rid of like half of it. I maybe made a video saying how it was worse. I still think that it was slightly worse. Then in 2022, we got the PS5 1200. Now this was an actual redesign. The 1200 is a different motherboard. It also has, again, less cooling, but that's because unlike the earlier models, this has a 6nm chip. The difference between a 7nm chip in the original PS5 and 6nm in the 1200 newer is huge, but it does mean it's a little bit more power efficient. The chip is a little bit smaller, a little bit cheaper for Sony to make and get better yields. But importantly, this was an actual physical difference, which to your point seemed really strange because typically when you have a new chip in a console, that's the perfect time to bring out the Slim model.
In the original shell of the PlayStation 5 was just so much extra just dead space. So the thought process there was like, okay, well, they're putting in a lot of emphasis on the plates. They want to do customization. They don't want to have people buy everything. So it's like, okay, the Slim version was just going to be a lighter weight. It would still be easier to yield, whatever. That's why I didn't think there would be an actual dedicated model, but now here they are coming out with this new model, which throws the panels out the window. And again, we mentioned in a couple of videos now, it's more expensive. Not even just Sony, but with any console manufacturer. Usually they make a new version of this.
For context, as far as I'm aware, the Xbox Series X basically hasn't changed at all. Like the launch model and one you would buy today, as far as I know, is essentially the exact same console. Whereas there have been 4 distinct PS5s at this point. We're 3 years in, which is to Sony's credit. Obviously, they want to optimize. They're selling a ton of PS5s. They want to make sure that not only are they able to make as many as possible, but also they're able to make profit on those. And from an end user perspective, while there are differences between all of these PS5s, you think about traditional Slim models. And what you would get there was, okay, you know, it's a smaller physical design and a couple of like minor features, right? PS4 Slim, it was significantly smaller and it was cheaper. But what we're seeing here is that the PS5 Slim essentially gives you a slightly larger SSD. It gives you a detachable disk drive. We'll talk a little bit about that later. Is a small upgrade that you have the flexibility, but I would argue that probably not that useful for most people because you're either going to buy the disc model, in which case the fact that you can take it off is never going to be relevant, or if you buy a digital PS5 and add the disc later, you're actually spending more if you had just done it to begin with. I just wouldn't say that that's like a major upgrade here. And the internals seem to be, for all intents and purposes, almost exactly the same as the 2022 PS5 1200.
I have a reenactment of how they decided to do the new internals. So here's a Sony engineer. He goes, "This is the 1200." Yeah, we got it, guys. We got it. That's how they figured out how to do the internals right there.
I don't know what goes on inside Sony HQ when they do these designs. Obviously, every year they want to sell as many PS5s as possible. They want to make profit. And there is something to be said for this is the first year since the PS5 has launched that the PS5 should be pretty much readily available throughout the holiday season. Now, the fact that the PS5 digital has seen a price increase for what I can guarantee you without any shadow of a doubt is a cheaper model for Sony to manufacture. Every single time they have made a new revision to the PS5, it has been cheaper. I'll hold out my final verdict here for the actual video because I'm still in the middle of actually experimenting with it and testing and stuff. But it seems like this PS5 design is cheaper in a lot of ways where they've kind of like removed some of like the extra vents and like some of the fancier details of the PS5, the original PS5. So like without a shadow of a doubt, I can say that this new PS5 Slim is cheaper for Sony to make than all of the other PS5s before. As they're making it cheaper, it feels like they're raising the price in almost every way except for the disc PS5 in the US is the only one that stayed the same. But pretty much everywhere else, it is either slightly inched forward or in the case of the digital, significantly more expensive. And what you're getting for that more expensive price point is
127 usable gigabytes. People just like overshadowed the one thing about Xbox where they jacked up the price in Brazil. It's like $700 or something like that in Brazil for a Series S, which is a weird like, oh, look at what they did in a single market versus what PlayStation is doing in every market.
Well,
that's just weird to me of like why that is a comparison. Just pinpoint one thing, which yes, it's egregious in Brazil. To say this is why this price increase on the PlayStation 5 is justified because Xbox is doing this in Brazil is weird when it's just like you say, like it's cheaper to manufacture. This is the most profit they're getting.
Yeah. The thing is, if you compare what Sony are doing with the PS5 and what Xbox are doing with the Series S and the Series X, it's a little bit hard because with the PS5, Sony brought out a design which was not profitable when it first came out, which is pretty normal for consoles, right? Like it's usually like you sell a little bit of a loss, you want to make it up over the long term. But Sony, for as far as I'm aware, had been selling the PS5 at a profit. You know, and then when you look at the inside of a PS5 compared to like a Series X, it makes sense. The Series X is a significantly more expensive and more complex design. The PS5 motherboard, heatsink, fan, super simple, and especially with the Slim, it is even more so. When you look at what Microsoft are doing with the Xbox, I don't think either of the Xboxes are profitable. I don't think that they are.
But like
the Series S is sold.
I don't think they care about selling.
Yeah, they want you to sign for Game Pass.
Right.
But like, it's a different mentality because you look at the Series S, especially when these things are available for like $300 or less. There's no way they're making money on that. I can't believe it, especially because you figure that they've got to pay for the distributors that have to pay for all these things. Like if you go to Best Buy or whatever and buy an Xbox, they're taking a chunk of that.
Taking a chunk of it. And
but like they've not done anything to shrink those things down. They've just they shipped them, which makes sense because Sony are out here optimizing every cent they can out of the PS5 because that is a big deal for them.
I want to remind people that they also have taken away other things out of the box as minimal, but like the stand, which is now a $30 add-on.
Oh, no, Matt. No, this is not true. They gave you a stand in the PS5 Slim box.
They gave you an oven.
Look, there you go. It's right here.
I like to think that, somewhere in the R&D department, they go, okay, well, we know that 87% of customers have it, sideways, whatever. They say, okay, well, because of physics, the heat will be channeled through.
The liquid metal can drip out on this side instead of that side.
Sure, whatever. Like, I love to think that that's what's going on.
Well, it's a different mentality, right? Sony actually need to make money. Microsoft can kind of burn unlimited cash because they like.
Right.
I'm saying that with a obviously a huge grain of salt. That's actually not what they're doing. But like, I don't think Microsoft are really trying to profit on the Xbox hardware. I don't think that's a main focus.
The Slim version of an Xbox is just Game Pass and xCloud.
Whereas Sony are like, they have to make money on these things because not only is it a smaller company, but PlayStation division, that's a huge revenue driver, specifically profit driver for Sony as a whole. They're on their way to sell 100 million PS5s. Like, I don't think there's a question that the PS5 is going to be every bit as popular as PS4 beforehand. So when you're selling that number of consoles and you really care about it, it does make sense to sort of cost cut as much as possible. But it does feel a little cynical that they're making more money than they have pretty much ever with the PlayStation division. They are raising the price generally almost everywhere, and certainly when it comes to the digital model. And they are making the console not necessarily worse, because I don't want to say that the PS5 Slim is like so much worse. None of the PS5s have been dramatically worse, but I will say that if you give me a PS5 1000, 1100, 1200, and Slim all on the table here, I'd probably go with the PS5 1000. That was the chunkiest, the biggest, but it also had the biggest, most solid cooler.
Yeah.
Yes, technically the 1200 and the Slim have a little bit less power draw, but to me, I don't care that much. It just feels weird that they are getting they're cheapening the consoles, and yet they're charging you just as much, if not more, for it. And that doesn't feel right to me.
As of right this moment, I don't think anyone should buy the Slim version. I think the amount of people who are like, I want to add on a disc version, I think that is such a small amount of people.
Sure, yeah, I can
okay, maybe you guys go and get it, whatever.
But it was different though before, because I think the value proposition before is if you're spending $400 on digital and $500 on a disc, $100 is a big difference. Like I would say, like most people probably should have just bought the digital, but now we're talking about a $50 difference, and that's the point where I'm like, for $50, maybe I do want to watch a Blu-ray or throw a game in there every once in a while. Like it's not quite as a like.
Me personally, like I've never used the disc drive. I've never used a movie in my media thing. That niche is just narrowing down
totally
day by day.
Well, here's the thing. This video is going to be very dated very quickly because they're not making any more of the old fat PS5.
Well, that's what I'm saying. As of right now, like if you see a fat PS5, that's the one I think you should get. Even if the price of the console doesn't go down, you know, places like Target or GameStop, like, oh, we'll give you a $50 gift card with it. This holiday season, I think it's gonna be the best time.
Yeah.
But like, I don't think there's any real benefit for most consumers to get the Slim version if the fat is available.
Yeah, I would say if you want a PS5 this holiday season, by all means go for it. The only one I would say, and it's really hard to tell unless you're actually in a store, the only one that I would maybe slightly avoid is the PS5 1100. But the thing is, there should be basically none of those left on store shelves. I agree with that. I think if you want a PS5, just go buy whatever has the best deal. The Slim is not really any better.
No, but it's actually more. So like that's like, if nothing else, it's gonna be no noticeable difference to you, I don't think.
It's a little smaller. That's the only noticeable thing.
But like when you go to play your game,
big, though.
It's gonna be the same.
Yeah.
Do you want to spend $400 or do you want to spend $450? Is $50 you worth?
Look, man, $50 is $50.
That's my point. $50 gets you a game. Here's what I think happened. They designed the new board because like all the rumors were, all right, we're gonna do it's gonna be like a 5 nanometer, 4 nanometer, 3 nanometer.
Yeah, which were dumb. Those rumors were never gonna happen.
It was gonna be a smaller chipset. I think this board was designed 5 years ago. Maybe not
a couple years ago.
A couple years ago. It's not like they're designing these things last week. So they say, okay, well, here's the roadmap before we know about the chip shortages, before we know about everything, and say like, okay, here's what we're gonna launch the 1000 whatever.
Yeah.
It's almost like the 1100 and 1200 weren't supposed to exist. They say like, okay, we're launching with this one, and here's our idea for the Slim, which would be for a smaller nanometer chipset. It's just like they shrunk it down incremental steps because they already had these things on order.
I actually don't think that is necessarily the case, mostly because back in 2020, before the launch of both PS5 and Series X, I had some conversations with some people who know a thing or two about developing consoles. It was very clear even back then, before chip shortages and everything like that there was not going to be the kind of incremental improvements in price and chips that we would normally see.
Yeah, we knew that.
7 nanometers was a good solid node to work on. 5, 4, 3, all the kind of the newer stuff simply is not cheaper. It is more expensive even when you consider the chips are smaller. There was a knowledge even back then when these consoles were being developed that as we go to these smaller nodes, that is not going to help the price at all. In fact, it's going to be more expensive to shrink that down. There was never going to be a 5 nanometer PS5 Slim because that would literally just be more expensive than the 6 or the 7. Like
but
7 and
they
6
could
is the
shrink it
same
down
thing.
and make it more efficient.
But it doesn't matter. I might save a few dollars on my power bill, but Sony are then gonna have to say, oh, we spent $30 extra because we wanted that smaller chip. Like, that's not a trade that anyone would make. At this point, if you want anything smaller than a 6 nanometer chip, what you're gonna have to do is basically pony up for that extra cash. And no one wants to do that because in the past, it was the other way around. Like, for example, with PS4, it shipped with a 28 nanometer node. It then went to a 16 nanometer for the Slim, which meant that it was a smaller chip, it was cheaper, blah, blah, blah. That is not happening anymore. The math doesn't work the same way that it used to, which means that these consoles aren't really getting cheaper. In fact, as we've seen, they're getting more expensive over time. And the other thing is that traditionally Slims have been cheaper, smaller, blah, blah, blah. Like, it's been better across the board. But now what we're seeing with this PS5, and if the Xbox rumors are true, probably with the next Series X, essentially side grades. Like, these Slim consoles are, yes, technically a little bit more power efficient. Yes, technically maybe a little bit smaller, but basically the same and ultimately not really cheaper, which that was always the main point of a Slim console is that, you know, all the early adopters go out and buy the PS3 when it first comes out, or PS4, Series X, or whatever. And then a few years later, the mainstream version comes out, which is $100 or $200 cheaper. It's a little bit smaller, a little bit more power efficient, a couple of minor changes. But what we're seeing instead is that these Slim models this time around are basically just the same thing. And if you went out and bought a PS5 or Series X in 2020 for retail price, you're probably sitting here looking pretty good that you did not waste the money and that you're looking at this Slim and like, I don't need it. that's kind of my thought, at least. You're coming close until the PS5 Pro shows up.
Follow us for when we talk about the PS5 Pro.
Once a month.
Let us know what you think about the PS5 Slim now that we've gotten our hands on it and can start seeing what it looks like under the hood. Like, follow, subscribe, and we will catch you on the next one. And go subscribe to Austin to watch.
Yeah, man, I'm just realizing, why didn't we have the PS5 on the table the whole time?
It's in the other room.
We should have put it right here. We should have put it right here.
There's a lot of screws that we didn't feel like moving.